My name is Haley, and I'm the behavior coordinator at South Suburban Humane Society. This video is for anyone working with or fostering a shy or fearful dog. They may be under socialized or have experienced some sort of trauma, but for whatever reason, they are afraid of interacting with humans. So I'm just going to talk about recognizing stress signals in them, and then just some things that can be done to create a more positive association for them with interacting with humans.
First, I think it's really important to look at the stress signals that dogs are going to display visibly so we can get a pretty good read on them, even if they're showing more subtle signs. So I'm going to point out a few of those as well as some of the more less known signals that we might be able to pick out. So a whale eye is really common. That's when they have their eyes really wide open. Generally, it's the result of them trying to kind of keep their eye on you without looking directly at you. So if you can see the whites of their eyes and you know that they're pretty nervous, that's generally a good sign that they're pretty stressed out. Another one that isn't super well known is looking at the corners of their mouths. Most dogs, the corners of their mouths are going to hang off of the bottom of their jaw just a little bit, even the tiniest bit. But if a dog's lips seem pretty taut, they're a straight line, straight back towards their cheeks, that is a really good indicator of a dog that's stressed out. Even if they are not really showing any other signals, it's just a really good general indicator of stress in a lot of dogs. General body signals are pretty common. I think the one that is probably the least well known would be if they're lifting their paw. If a dog is kind of just looking around, standing around, and they're holding one of their paws up, that is just a general indicator they are uneasy or stressed out. The tail is pretty straightforward as well, but a particularly straight tail is going to be a really stressed out indicator. Some dogs that put their hackles up, sometimes their hackles go all the way down their tail, and that can be pretty goofy looking sometimes, but that is an extreme indicator of stress. Other dogs may hold their tail lower than natural. So if you know that there's a dog that normally has a curly tail that curls over their back, but they're in a new situation and their tail is hanging lower towards the floor, then you know that's a pretty good indicator that that dog is uneasy. Not necessarily needing to totally leave the situation, but definitely need to keep an eye on a dog that is feeling that sort of way. It can be really easy to forget how important our body language is when it comes to approaching dogs, especially if we are used to a lot of really well socialized and friendly dogs. So when we greet a shy or nervous dog, first impressions can be really important. And even any time that you are trying to approach them or greet them, even if it's the third time, the fifth time, if they're nervous, pushing them too soon can kind of cause them to backtrack on any progress that they're making, especially with you as a person. I also like to remind people that you shouldn't assume that all dogs want to meet you, and you shouldn't take it personally when they don't. And then also that all dogs are individuals, and like I said, if we're used to really socialized, friendly dogs, they're going to be okay with a lot of these things. However, any dog in general, these tips can help make them feel more comfortable when we are approaching or trying to interact with them. I think one of the most important things is allowing the dog to approach you on its own terms. It's okay to kind of get in their general vicinity and then try and coax them into moving towards you and closing the gap on their own. Eye contact is also something that we socialize dogs to be okay with, but when they are interacting with each other, it's something that is seen as aggressive. So if we are mindful of where we're looking and we avert our eyes away from the dog, it can also help a lot in relieving some of the pressure or the tension that they're feeling from our presence. It's really good to either stand up totally straight or squat all the way down if you're able to, rather than leaning over or bending over them to pet them or try to interact. It's just scary in general to them. And then also turning your side towards the dog. That's another thing, that when they are interacting with each other, they are not going to approach each other head on when they're being friendly. They come more towards the side because moving towards each other face to face head on is another aggressive body language. We also want to speak calmly. I know it can be pretty tempting to use the baby voice to try and coax an animal or communicate with them, but higher pitched noises tend to be scarier for them, so talking in low, calm voices is generally going to help them feel more comfortable. You can slowly offer your hand out, and if they react negatively, then just bring it back and continue to interact with your hands to yourself. However, if you think that you are getting closer and you feel pretty comfortable that you might be able to pet the dog, you want to go for the neck, the chest, or the shoulder rather than reaching over their head and trying to pet the top of their head. Or you can go, if they're kind of facing away from you, you can pet their back or towards their rear end, but you want to make sure that they are aware that you are going to touch them before you do so. Pay close attention to their body language, and if they are seeming to get increasingly more stressed out, then maybe back off a little and give them some space. And definitely if they are trying really hard to get away from you, then you may want to let them go ahead and have some alone time and decompress a little before you try again. Something else that will be extremely helpful is knowing the difference between fearful and submissive behavior, especially as these dogs start to get more comfortable interacting with humans and they actually start seeking out human interaction. They're probably going to start showing submissive behaviors before they show any super comfortable, happy, friendly sort of behavior or body language. It can be kind of tricky to differentiate the two, but when it's broken down into this really specific definitions, it's pretty easy to kind of figure it out with context clues. Fearful behavior is non-social, so it can be in response to inanimate objects, sounds, smells, just anything, but as well as people. But the motivation behind it is to avoid or escape whatever it is that is stressing them out. And on the other end, submissive behavior is social behavior. It's always shown when it interacting with people or other animals. It's not in response to anything that isn't alive or a sound or anything like that. And the motivation behind it is to interact. Ultimately, the dog wants to approach in a way that is non-threatening, and they aren't sure about how you or the dog is going to interact or react to their approach, but they, like I said, they want to do so in a way that is as non-threatening as possible. The activities that I'm going to talk about are pieces of something that is called a behavior modification plan. And basically that is just a systematic approach to changing behavior, and it also allows us to monitor progress or regression if there is any. The first step is always going to be environmental management, but I talk a little more about that in the next video, the part 2 of this one, where I will go into meeting their basic needs and lower stress handling, and that would cover anything in the environmental management aspect. And then the first activity is quiet time. Basically, this is just going to teach the dog that being in the presence of humans is not going to be a bad experience. And you just want to take them to a quiet location and don't really pressure them to interact with you at all. Just be around you. And you can read a book silently or out loud, or you could draw, or any other quiet activity, and just be in their presence. Um, and either of these activities can be done in the shelter or at home with a foster. The second one is going to be having a lunch date, and that is where you take the dog to a location and you eat your own meal. It doesn't have to be lunch, but you also bring some of their food or some treats, or you share some of yours, and you scatter it on the floor around them or around you. The first goal is to have the dog eat in your presence at all. So, a lot of stressed out dogs are going to avoid eating in the presence of people. But the first goal is you want them to eat when you are around, and then the end goal is to have them actually eat from your hands. And both of these things are going to help socialize them, and they're really the first and easiest steps that you can take to make them have a better association with interacting with people.
So again, my name is Haley and I'm the behavior coordinator at South Suburban Humane Society. If you have any questions or any ideas of things that you would like to see me cover, you can email me or comment down below. Again, I hope everybody is doing really well and we can't wait to see you guys back in the shelter soon.